Okay, so back with this top. It's been a few days since I glued this up and I've left it in here with the weights on, kind of more out of hope than expectation that it's going to flatten it out any, but we'll just take the weights off and see what we've got. And there's still a little bit of pop there, but I do actually think that has come down a little bit. And get a straight edge across it. I definitely think that has taken a little bit of the bow out of it. So that's a little bit of good news I wasn't expecting. Now, what I'd like to get done in this episode is to kind of get this body shape cut out somewhere near. I don't want to be kind of like dead on precise with it. I want to leave a little bit of room for error, for trimming, etc. And then I want to kind of lay out and set up for these F-holes and get those cut out. And to do that, I'm going to have to do a little bit of design work because I don't really kind of fully understand how I want these to look at the moment. I'll do a bit of research, look at some options, etc. But whilst I'm going about that, I can get this cut out. So without further ado, we'll get this over to the bandsaw and get the waste off. And there we have it, kind of roughly cut to shape. There's still, I've left maybe 2 or 3 millimeters around both edges just to give myself a little bit of scope to play with this, but I think we're pretty much where we need to be. Of course, we're going to be binding this, so there's an additional kind of 1.5 mm that's going to come off, so we've got plenty of wood to play with. I've kind of got it lined up on the centre lines, and I think everything seems to be working just fine, so no issues there. And because we've narrowed this down quite a bit now, there's kind of less scope for it to be bent, and actually to push this down in the middle, it's only about 1 mm now, hardly anything at all. So that is well within the scope of what we're able to kind of glue down now. And now that it's actually a guitar shape, you can perhaps see how nice that figure is going to look. And in fact, I'm just going to try and give it a quick kind of dampen down with a bit of isopropyl alcohol, just to see if we can pop that grain out a little bit. Like that, and I think that shows it off absolutely beautifully. So yeah, I think this is going to look very, very nice when it's done. Okay, so now we need to figure out what we're going to do with these F-holes. And to sort these F-holes out, I need a bit of a starting point. I can't see any reason in kind of reinventing the wheel at all on this. I've done something similar to this in the past and it worked very well. And that was when I made my Thinline Telecaster. And for that, I used this routing template. However, I've done some sketching and some kind of figuring out, and I think that these F-holes are actually a little bit too small for this body. This body is only marginally wider than a Telecaster, but it is quite a bit longer. So I want to just elongate those F-holes a little bit just to make up for that. And what I've come up with is this, and this should fit onto that body, something like that. I think it's a nice sizable F-hole. It looks a bit chunky at the moment, but you've got to remember that we are going to be binding these, so eventually that's going to come inside of there 1.5 millimeters all the way around. So it will look a little bit smaller and subtler once it's installed and once it's cut out and we've got the binding in place. I've done the checks, and if I position this in exactly the same place on the inside part of the body. The F-hole is kind of well within the cutout for the chambering, so we're good to go on that. So I can get the body out of the way for a little while. And what I've done is I've set up all of this paper so that I can trace it out on one side, flip the paper over, align it all again on the centre lines and these other lines, trace out the second one, and then I've got the two templates that I actually need to do the cutting out. Now, I'm not going to make a routing template for this. What I did on my last build, on my last couple of builds with F-holes, is I've actually kind of positioned these templates where they need to go. I've stuck them down with some Pritt stick, and then I've used a scalpel to trace their outline and cut that directly into the wood. And then from there, I can cut the rest of this out with a coping saw or a fret saw. And that actually worked really well. It just left me with a tiny little bit of cleanup to do with a carving file or a bit of sandpaper on a stick or something to get the F-holes exactly where I need them. So I'm just going to crack on and literally use a set of French curves just to trace this out the best I can. And I'll get back to you in a few minutes for the next bit. And there, after a bunch of figuring out and laying out and setting up and changing, I've actually got something which I think works really well. So what I'm doing is I'm just marking this diagonal line that runs through the centre of the F-hole onto the top, so I can use that to locate the two individual little templates when I cut them out from this main one and stick them into position. But before I do that, I'm just going to quadruple check that this template works with regard to the chambering. And to do that, I've got a mark on here that corresponds with a little mark on the template itself. Kind of line it up with the centre lines, and then what I'm checking is that kind of all of the F-hole falls within the chambering, and it does in this instance. However, all of this kind of discussion around F-holes and stuff does lead me on to a couple of comments I've had recently about why I choose the projects that I do and why I build them how I do. And the suggestion was that I kind of tend to build guitars that are very similar to guitars that already exist. And I'm quite happy to put my hand up to that. Most of the stuff I build is very similar to guitars that are available to buy. I don't tend to do my own designs, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, we've been making electric guitars now for kind of the best part of 100 years. We're not that far off. And if I'm honest, I think most of the really good designs have already been designed. And I don't really believe that personally I can design them any better. So that's part of the reason why I kind of go with stuff that's already been done. I might tweak it as I am doing in this case, but generally speaking, there's nothing groundbreaking there. I think secondly, and this is right in the kind of title of the channel, you know, this is the Shed of Dreams, and a lot of what I'm building are the guitars that I dreamed of having back in the days when I had absolutely no chance of owning any of them. So for me, this is about kind of building those dreams for myself. Thirdly, and I think this is probably the most pertinent and important thing, is I don't consider myself an expert in any of this. I consider this as part of my guitar building journey, which, as far as I'm concerned, hasn't really got going in any sense, really. I haven't been doing this like 50 years or something. I'm not some grand master. And just like you wouldn't write a book without reading a few first, I think it makes sense for me to not design any guitars until I've built an absolute bunch of them. So as much as anything, the reason I build guitars that look a lot like guitars that already exist is I'm still learning, I'm still practicing, and I'm still trying to get my head around all of the little tricks that geniuses like Leo Fender put into their guitars that made them as great as they were. Perhaps once I've learnt a few more of those tricks, I'll start my own designs. But personally, for now, I'm quite happy doing what I do. Let me know in the comments what you think of that, because obviously this channel just isn't about me. Anyway, let's get back on with this. So now I've got kind of multiple marks on this body, so I know exactly where my templates need to go. I can just cut them down to a more manageable size. Just do them one at a time. I'm going to break out a bit of Pritt stick. Now this is the new fangled meat-free vegan Pritt stick. I just get the feeling it's not as good as the old stuff. The old stuff didn't kind of clump up as much as this, and it wasn't as gooey. Cleaned up a lot nicer, but you know, modern world, it's what we've got. So then I can just kind of line everything up. Make sure it's nicely smoothed down. And then, ever so gently at first, I'm just going to score this in with an extremely sharp and new scalpel blade, which will actually make cutting this with a fret saw a lot easier. And the trick to this marking technique is the first pass is very light, just focusing on following the line, and then subsequent passes put a bit more pressure on, make this cut deeper and deeper, and that will give you something really, really positive for your coping saw and your fret saw to follow. Okay, so I've kind of been around that now. I'll just peel this off. that's given us a nice positive marking of where we need to be. So I need to just give this a quick clean up because it's covered in this tacky glue, so I'll just wipe that down, get rid of that, then I'll go round what I've marked out with the scalpel, just with a pencil line to make it a little bit clearer, and we can get on with cutting this out. And to cut this out, I've got my trusty bench hook, which I'm sure you've all seen before. New Concepts fret saw, very nice bit of kit, not particularly cheap, but does give very good results. And you can see there, I've drilled a few holes in kind of strategic places. Give me a start, and a case of feeding the saw blade through, getting it fastened in and tightened up. Okay, and there's the first one cut out. There's a little bit of cleaning up work to do, but not really much. There's probably less than 0.5 millimetre of material to take out. So with that done, we can get this back on the bench, mark up for the other one, and do exactly the same process again. I'm not going to film it all. You've seen it once. You don't really need to see it again, but I'll join back with you as we get towards the completion of the second F-hole. Okay, so I've just given this a quick clean up. I've got rid of most of the kind of pencil lines that were just quite confusing really. So that's looking a lot better, and I'm just going to start working my way around kind of with some carving files and just normal files, and just clean up all of the kind of remnants of waste material that are still kind of evident around these F-holes. And realistically, it's just a case of working your way around until you're rid of all of the kind of little saw marks. But also, because we cut in that deep knife mark, you can still actually see that. I don't know if you can see it in there, but that's our knife mark. So that's kind of where we need to be going down to. And then just a finer file just to clean that up. Properly. And that's one element of this first F-hole done. Obviously this is going to take an absolute age, so I'll leave this video here. I'll crack on with this off camera, and I'll join you back next time where hopefully we can start to think about getting these F-holes bound. And I'm actually quite excited about that because I haven't done that job before. So as always, I'll be back in a couple of days' time with that. Until then, don't forget to hit that like button if you've enjoyed this, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.